Welcome to Stoic Philosophy for Life. This is not just a place to listen to books, it's a space to feel them with your soul. Here, we illuminate your mind with timeless lessons. Awaken your inner strength, cultivate self-minus discipline, and guide your journey of personal growth. Every word is carefully chosen to reach what you're truly seeking: peace, clarity, and lasting transformation. If this feels like the place for you, hit subscribe and walk this path with us every single day. Now, put on your headphones, take a deep breath, and begin the journey of renewing your mind and your life. After 40, these 100 life rules will be your greatest asset. After 40, your definition of wealth changes. You stop counting only what you have accumulated, and you begin to notice what you have managed to preserve. Your peace, your values, your time, your presence, the people who stayed, the truth you did not sell. These become the real assets. Not loud, not flashy, but deeply rooted. What you keep through the storms, the temptations, the noise becomes the foundation of your next decade. Because after 40 you understand it is not what you chase that builds your life. It is what you hold on to when chasing loses its shine. And more importantly, it is what you are finally willing to let go of. You begin to realize that not everything that shines is worth your reach. That not every opportunity is aligned. That not every person who shows up deserves a seat at your table. You stop stretching yourself thin in the name of potential. You stop chasing what drains you. You stop spending energy like it is infinite. Because it is not. And now you know how you spend your attention is how you spend your life. You start auditing your habits, not just for efficiency, but for resonance. You ask, does this give me energy or take it? You stop optimizing for outcomes and start optimizing for alignment. You stop glorifying the hustle. You value flow. You value ease. You value feeling alive on an ordinary Tuesday more than being celebrated on a chaotic Friday. You begin to see that simplicity is not lack. It is clarity. And clarity is a kind of currency. When you know who you are and what you are about, your life stops leaking energy. You no longer need to chase every invitation, fix every misunderstanding, or explain every no. Your silence becomes strong. Your time becomes sacred. Rule 1: if it costs your peace, it is too expensive. No matter how profitable it looks on paper. Rule 2: never trade your long-term self-respect for short-term validation. Rule 3: wealth is not how much you have, it is how little you need to feel whole. Rule 4: every yes is an investment. Choose wisely where you deposit your energy. Rule 5: a quiet life you love is richer than a loud one you resent. You stop proving. You start preserving. You protect your mornings, your friendships, your boundaries. You stop apologizing for needing space. You stop waiting for others to value your time before you do. You understand now that everything you say yes to is a debt you must pay with your energy. And not all debts are worth the cost. You start choosing depth over drama, connection over convenience, real over rushed. You want slow conversations that make you feel seen, not surface chats that leave you emptier. You begin to curate your life like it is your last masterpiece. Because it is. And maybe for the first time you are not afraid to say, I do not need more. I just need to live more honestly with what I already have. At a certain point, and it almost always comes after 40, you begin to understand that time is not what you thought it was. It is not a resource you manage. It is not something you save or stretch. It is not something you can win more of by being efficient. Time is not your possession. It is your environment. It is where your entire life is lived. And what shapes your future is not how much time you have, but how you inhabit the time you are already in. You stop asking, how can I fit more in? And you start asking, how can I feel more present in what I already have? You stop worshiping at the altar of productivity. You stop stacking your schedule like a badge. You begin to realize that being fully in one moment is worth more than being halfway present in 10. That attention is what turns minutes into meaning. And you have wasted enough time chasing more when what you needed was depth. You no longer count hours the way you used to. You begin to see that an hour of silence or connection, or honesty, is infinitely more valuable than a full day of doing things that do not light you up. You begin to remove urgency from places it does not belong. You stop rushing through dinner. You stop multitasking joy. You stop missing your own life because your mind is always preparing for the next thing. You finally admit being busy is not the same as being alive. You start guarding your mornings like they are sacred because they are. You begin to understand that how you start sets the tone for everything else. You stop checking your phone first. You begin with breath, with intention, with stillness. You stop jumping into the world before you have met yourself that day. That first hour is not a warm minus up, it is the foundation. You also stop feeling guilty for time that looks empty from the outside. You realize now that space is not laziness, it is life. It is reflection, integration, sanity. You start putting white space back in your calendar, not for what you might do, but for who you might become in the absence of noise. You begin to notice how often your days are shaped by things you did not choose: obligations, expectations, unconscious habits. So you slow down. You take inventory. You ask yourself hard but honest questions: if I keep living this day over and over, what kind of life am I building? You bring someday into today through small choices that align with your deeper truth. You stop postponing the good stuff, the trip, the conversation, the book you said you would write. You stop waiting for the perfect moment, because now you know the perfect moment is always now, if you are awake enough to claim it. You stop treating joy like a luxury. You stop waiting until you feel more deserving. You start living like someone who knows time will not wait for you to be ready. You also let go of the myth that you need to hustle your way into meaning. You stop trying to cram legacy into a packed calendar. You begin to see that what people remember is not how much you did, but how they felt when you were with them. Presence leaves a longer imprint than performance ever could. Rule 6: every moment is either a transaction or an investment. Choose which one you are making. Rule 7: do not confuse urgency with importance. They often live on different streets. Rule 8: how you spend the first hour of your day will echo through the next 10. Rule 9: a minute of full presence is worth more than an hour of distracted effort. Rule 10: stop trying to find more time. Start living like the time you have is sacred. You start reclaiming time from old patterns, from relationships that drain, from the need to be constantly responsive. You stop apologizing for not being available all the time. You let people be surprised by your boundaries and you let them adjust. You do not need to be reachable if being reachable means being unreachable to yourself. You stop measuring a day by what you got done. You start measuring it by how it felt. By the moments you truly showed up. By the breath you took on purpose. By the love you gave without agenda. You begin to see that time is not made meaningful by how much you squeeze into it, but by what you make space for. And in that space, something begins to bloom. You start hearing yourself again. You begin to create, not just produce. You begin to love, not just perform. You begin to rest, not just collapse. You start building a life that fits you, not one that just fills your hours. This is the freedom after 40. Not freedom to escape time, but freedom to stop being ruled by it. To stop chasing it. To stop fearing it. And to start partnering with it as something sacred. Something alive. Something that was never meant to be managed, only honored. Because you do not get more of it. You just get better at living inside it. After a certain age, and it rarely happens before you have lived long enough to lose something you once thought permanent, you stop chasing the illusion of omnipresence. You stop trying to be in every room, say yes to every invitation, impress every crowd. You begin to feel the cost of being stretched thin. Not in your calendar, but in your nervous system. You begin to feel the disconnection that comes from being present nowhere, because you are attempting to be everywhere. And you realize quantity of presence means nothing without the quality of it. You begin to feel the power of full attention, not only as a gift to others, but as a healing you give to yourself. To listen without thinking of your response. To eat without checking your phone. To walk without rushing somewhere. To sit in silence without needing to scroll through noise. These are not small things. These are acts of rebellion in a culture of distraction. Presence becomes your wealth. You do not need to own more. You need to be in what you already own. Your relationships. Your mornings. Your moments. You stop looking for fulfillment in novelty and start finding it in presence. You realize that the richest moment is rarely the most exciting. It is the one you are most fully alive inside of. You also stop trying to fix people while being absent from yourself. You begin to see that offering true presence, not advice, not performance, not productivity, is the most generous thing you can give to any relationship. You become less interested in being useful and more committed to being real. You stop offering solutions when someone needs your eyes, not your expertise. You stop multitasking in conversations. You listen like it matters, because now it does. You begin to notice how rare it is for someone to look at you without a screen between their eyes and yours. So you become that person. The one who slows down. The one who asks a question and stays long enough to hear the real answer. The one who is not in a hurry to move on. You stop rushing people. You stop rushing yourself. And in doing that, you reclaim something more than time. You reclaim depth. The depth that comes when you stop living on the surface of your own life. When you stop checking boxes and start choosing connection. If you're here right now, it means you're not waiting for life to happen. You're preparing for it. 2025 won't just be another year. It could be your breakthrough year, if you stay open to growth and committed to the work. Let this be your reminder you're not behind. You're just getting ready. When you stop thinking, what else do I need, and begin asking, what if I were fully in this? You realize that presence is not something you add. It is something you remove obstacles to. You start creating space, not to fill it, but to feel it. You say no to noise. You say yes to quiet. You pause before you respond. Use it for an extra minute after your coffee. You notice the breeze, the light, the tone of your own voice. Rule 11: if you cannot be present with it, it is not truly yours. Rule 12: what you rush through will never satisfy you, no matter how beautiful it is. Rule 13: slowness is not laziness. It is access to your full intelligence. Rule 14: the rarest currency now is not money. It is undivided attention. Rule 15: who you are when no one is watching is who you actually become. You begin to practice presence like it is strength training, because it is. Your mind, conditioned for speed, resists. But you return. You breathe. You choose one thing at a time. One conversation. One movement. One task. You let your life be lived in whole sentences, not fragments. You begin to live like someone who is no longer running away, not from silence, not from boredom, not from yourself. You sit longer with your emotions. You no longer demand they go away. You let your feelings complete their sentence. And when they do, you notice peace does not always come from fixing. Sometimes it comes from fully witnessing. Presence makes you less reactive. You no longer jump into every argument. You no longer respond to every misunderstanding. You do not need to defend yourself when you are anchored in who you are. You do not need to explain every no. You speak slower. Fewer words. More truth. You stop needing so many answers. You start appreciating better questions. You begin to live like someone who trusts life not as a system to beat, but as a rhythm to listen to. You begin to experience stillness not as absence, but as arrival. This is when you stop living your life through a lens. You stop documenting more than you feel. You stop framing moments and start being in them. You no longer need the world to witness your life for it to matter. You are the witness now. You are the one who sees. And that is more than enough. Presence does not make your life more exciting, it makes it more alive. It does not make you richer in status, but it makes you rich in memory, in connection, in peace, in breath. And after 40, that is the kind of richness that truly matters. Because when the noise fades and the years move quickly and the work slows down, what you will remember and what will remain is how present you were. Not how fast you went. Not how much you achieved. But how fully you belong to your own life. There is a kind of power that only comes when you have spent enough years following all the rules, only to realize most of them were never written with your joy in mind. The rules about what success should look like, what love should feel like, how a day should begin, when a life is considered respectable, what makes a person worthy. You followed them. You did what was expected. And for a while, it worked, or so you thought. But then something shifted. It did not feel like rebellion at first. It felt like restlessness. A quiet discomfort with the very structure you had spent decades trying to fit into. And if you listened closely, you heard it, the voice of your deeper self. Not louder than fear, but clearer. I whisper, asking, what if I built a life that felt like mine? That question changes everything. Because once you ask it, you cannot unask it. Once you see that many of the rules you live by are inherited, unexamined, and misaligned, you can no longer follow them in good faith. You begin to feel the cost of obedience without resonance. The burden of being good but not free. The weight of saying yes to a version of life that looks successful but feels hollow. So you begin the slow and sacred process of writing. Of pausing before each decision and asking, is this aligned with who I am now, or just who I used to be afraid to disappoint? You become a curator of your own existence. Not in a way that is reactive or careless, but intentional, purposeful. You are no longer interested in living a life that simply works, you want one that fits. You stop asking, is this allowed, and start asking, is this aligned? Because alignment is the new form of permission. It does not require consensus. It does not need to be explained. It just needs to feel like truth in your bones. That is enough. You begin to realize that not all rules are wrong, but not all are for you. Some were written for another time, another person, another story. And your job is not to follow rules blindly. Your job is to follow your alignment bravely. Even when it breaks tradition. Even when it challenges expectation. Even when it looks like failure to those still stuck in the old way. Rule 16: what aligns may not always be convenient, but it will always be clean. Rule 17: if you keep betraying yourself to follow the rule, the cost is your soul. Rule 18: you do not need to explain what resonates. You just need to listen and obey. Rule 19: the best life is not the most impressive, it is the most honest. Rule 20: alignment is a daily choice, not a destination, not a personality trait, but a compass. You start noticing how much energy you spent trying to be understood by people who only see life through their version of right. You begin to see the wisdom in silence, the freedom in restraint. You no longer feel the need to convince. You simply choose. And in that choosing, you feel your power return. You create rhythms that support your nervous system, not your performance. You design days that reflect your real values, not borrowed expectations. You stop filling time. You start filling yourself. With what nourishes. With what strengthens. With what restores clarity. And when you get it wrong because you no longer spiral. You align. You do not shame yourself for missteps. You notice them. You course correct. You keep moving forward. Because living in alignment is not about being flawless. It is about staying faithful to your truth, to your boundaries, to the unfolding. You also stop outsourcing authority. You stop giving power to people who have never lived a day in your skin. You stop letting their fears shape your freedom. You no longer need a crowd to agree before you act. You just need a conscience that is clear. And every time you trust yourself over the noise, you strengthen the muscle of sovereignty. This becomes your new operating system. And that direction, it shapes your next decade. So now you choose with care, with slowness, with softness. You no longer rush toward the next shiny thing. You ask, will this help me build the kind of life I can live with peace? You trust that if it is not a yes in your spirit, it is not yours to carry. This is not resistance. This is responsibility. The kind that says, I will not live on autopilot anymore. I will not let guilt make my decisions. I will not abandon myself to belong. I will design a life that honors what I know, what I value, what I have paid to understand. Because that kind of life is the true asset. There comes a point, often quietly, without fanfare, when you stop being obsessed with getting everything. Not because you have given up, but because you have finally woken up. You begin to feel the exhaustion not from failure, but from the constant effort to be more, to own more, to become more than you already are. And at some deep level, something inside you says, what if enough is not a finish line to reach but a home to return to? You start to notice the cost of your ambitions. Not just in missed time or stretched energy, but in the parts of yourself you traded for milestones. You remember the dinners skipped, the mornings rushed, the laughter postponed, the words never said because you were too focused on achieving something else. You begin to wonder, what did I build that I no longer want to maintain? And perhaps more importantly, what did I abandon that still wants to be restored? After 40, the equation changes. It is no longer about more. It is about meaning. No longer about collecting, but about curating. You become a guardian of your attention, a protector of your time, You stop adding without asking. You stop saying yes without soul. Because at this stage, you begin to understand the life that looks full is not always the one that feels full. And feeling full, not bloated with business, but rooted in presence, becomes the measure of success. Not the title. Not the square footage. Not the followers or the speed. But the deep, grounded sense that nothing inside you is being ignored while everything outside you keeps moving. You stop measuring yourself by the things you have not yet done. You start honoring yourself for what you have survived, what you have learned, what you have chosen to release. You see now that wholeness is not created by chasing more, it is revealed by needing less. And needing less is not deprivation. It is discipline. It is freedom. It is clarity. Rule 20- when the fastest way to feel full is to stop feeding what no longer nourishes you. Rule 20-2 if it costs you yourself minus respect, it is not worth the return no matter how shiny it looks. Rule 20-3 life after 40 is not about reaching everything, it is about remembering what actually matters. Rule 20-4 do not mistake possession for fulfillment. Rule 20-5 peace is not found at the top, it is found when you stop climbing someone else's mountain. You begin to redefine ambition. Not as external conquest, but as internal congruence. You want to live in a way that makes sense to your nervous system. You want your calendar to reflect your values, not your fears. You want your relationships to feel safe, not performative. You stop impressing people who are not invested in your well-being. You start impressing yourself quietly, humbly, honestly. You also stop letting urgency make your choices. You stop believing the lie that if you do not grab something now, it will disappear. You know now anything meant for you will return in the right time, and anything that requires you to betray yourself to get it was never aligned to begin with. You let go of the frantic. You move slower, but you move stronger. You begin to ask different questions. Not what am I missing, but what am I ignoring? Not what should I pursue, but what already brings me back to life. You stop assuming the answer is somewhere out there. You begin to look inward. To listen. To trust. This kind of inner recalibration is not glamorous. It does not look like success from the outside. It looks like boundaries. Like leaving early. Like unsubscribing. Like deleting the app. Like staying in bed on a Sunday morning because your body said not today, and at first it feels strange. But soon, it feels like coming home. You start to live like someone who has nothing to prove and everything to protect. You protect your joy, your softness, your ability to stay tender in a world that rewards armor. You stop calling your gentleness a liability. You start calling it a lifestyle. You stop over-explaining your peace. You simply live in it and let others adjust. You no longer idolize exhaustion. You stop glorifying burnout as a badge of honor. You remember that being tired all the time is not a personality, it is a problem. And the solution is not to push harder. It is to pause. To pivot. To breathe. To reassess what you are actually chasing and why. You begin to see the beauty of just enough. Enough space. Enough work. Enough people. Enough output. You no longer need to fill every gap with effort. You start to trust the pause between efforts. The sacredness of silence. How many years have passed where you promised yourself change, but drifted back into comfort? This time, it's different because you're still here. You're listening, you're learning, and most importantly, you're not quitting. And that's what separates wishful thinking from real transformation. The richness of simplicity. You no longer believe that more is better. You believe that better is better and better often means less. You live lighter now. Not because your life is easier, but because you carry it differently. You no longer grip. You hold gently. You no longer force. You flow. You no longer demand. You invite. You no longer hustle for joy. You create space for it to find you. And in that space, something beautiful happens. You remember who you were before the world convinced you to chase everything. You meet the part of you that was always steady, always wise, always whole. And you say to her, let us begin again this time, with less noise and more truth. Because you are not here to own everything. You are here to own yourself. There comes a time in your life, and often it is somewhere after 40, when you finally realize that you are not lazy. You are not weak. You are not lacking in discipline. You are just exhausted from trying to control yourself through pressure, punishment, and perfection. You have spent years whipping your life into shape, telling yourself that if you were just more disciplined, more focused, more productive, then you would finally feel peace. But what you discovered was a truth too quiet to be taught. Discipline without devotion is just another kind of self-abandonment. You begin to see that what you truly lacked was not willpower. It was alignment. What you were missing was not another routine, but a reason. A deeper why. Not external accountability, but internal respect. Because when you truly respect yourself, not in theory, but in action, you begin to treat your time, your body, your energy differently. Not with force, but with reverence. You stop asking, how do I force myself to do this? And you start asking, what am I doing this for? You no longer treat discipline like a weapon. You begin to see it as a language, one that allows your deepest values to be lived, not just thought. You begin to understand that consistency flows not from control, but from clarity. You choose what matters and you give your time to it. Not out of fear of failure, but from a devotion to becoming. Not from anxiety about your worth, but from love for your unfolding. You move from motivation to meaning. From hustle to harmony. From punishment to purpose. Rule 20-6 Discipline that disconnects you from yourself is not strength, it is suppression. Rule 20-7 Devotion is what remains when motivation fades. Rule 20-8 Do not build routines that require you to abandon yourself to succeed. Rule 20-9 The most powerful structure is one that supports your softness, not shames it. Rule 30 Respect is the real root of every sustainable habit. You begin to create habits not to prove something but to protect something. Your energy. Your clarity. Your ability to show up for what you love. You wake up earlier not because it is trendy, but because you want space for yourself before the world begins. You write not to be productive, but to remember what you believe. You eat well not to punish your body, but to honor the energy that carries you. These are not boxes to tick. These are acts of devotion. And on the days you cannot do them, you do not spiral. You adjust. You return. You no longer confuse a break with a collapse. You no longer let one missed morning become a month of self-judgment. You stop defining your worth by your output. You start measuring your life by your return rate, how quickly you come back to what grounds you. You begin to move with rhythm, not rigidity. You build rituals that support your real life, not the fantasy version of you that only exists when everything is perfect. You let your systems breathe. You let your body lead. You trust that if something feels chronically heavy, it is not you failing, it is your body asking you to renegotiate. You learn to rest not just as recovery, but as rhythm. You stop saving rest as a reward for performance. You let it be part of your performance. You stop pushing through. You start tuning in. You understand that sometimes the most aligned action is to pause. And that pause? It teaches you more than the push ever did. It teaches you how to listen, how to notice, how to discern. It teaches you the difference between resistance that needs to be moved through and resistance that needs to be respected. You stop bulldozing yourself. You start co-creating with your own nervous system. You understand that sustainable action requires a sustainable relationship with yourself. And that relationship is built in the small moments. The moment you speak kindly to yourself after forgetting something. The moment you choose to walk instead of scroll. The moment you forgive yourself for being human. The moment you begin again not from shame, but from compassion. You build discipline like a sacred fire. Not roaring, but steady. You feed it daily. You do not let it die. You do not burn yourself in it. You let it warm your life. You let it light your path. And when it dims, you do not panic, you simply return. This kind of discipline is not loud. It does not shout. It does not need to be seen. It lives quietly in your choices, in how you treat your time, in what you say yes to, in how you handle interruptions, in how you prioritize your peace. You begin to respect yourself so deeply that showing up for what matters becomes natural. You no longer need to psych yourself up. You do not need tricks or hacks for your hacks. You simply align. You do not waste energy negotiating with yourself. You make a promise, and you show up. Not because you have to, because you get to. And when life changes because it will, you adapt. You do not cling to routines that no longer fit. You evolve. You trust your devotion more than your schedule. You let your inner compass guide you, not the voices telling you what successful people do. Because you are no longer trying to live like someone else. You are living like you. Fully. Freely. With structure that serves your softness. With patterns that protect your purpose. And that is discipline you can grow old with. There comes a quiet reckoning after 40. Not a crisis, not an explosion, but a gentle inner shift. You find yourself waking up one morning and realizing that your arms are full. Your schedule is full. Your mind is full. Your inbox is full. But your spirit feels empty. It is not depression. It is not failure. It is a silent weight of carrying too many things that were never truly yours to begin with. You have spent years picking things up, ideas, expectations, roles, burdens, without always asking, do I want this? Do I believe this? Do I even need this? And now you feel it. The emotional heaviness of a life that was designed to meet other people's comfort. A calendar built for obligation, not desire. A personality shaped for likability, not authenticity. You do not need more strength. You need more discernment. Because carrying everything is not a virtue, it is a form of quiet self-abandonment. A slow erosion of your center. And now, you are done. Not with the people you love, not with the purpose you hold, but with the pressure to be everything for everyone, all the time. You begin to lay things down. Gently. One by one. You lay down the need to be liked by everyone. You lay down the need to explain your boundaries. You lay down the old stories that no longer fit the person you are becoming. You stop editing yourself for comfort. You stop translating your truth into something more palatable. You stop shrinking. Rule 30-1: just because you can carry it, does not mean it is yours to carry. Rule 30 minus to letting go is not weakness. It is wisdom. Rule 30 minus 3 if it drains you more than it grows you, it is not your path. Rule 30 minus for a lighter life is not a smaller life. It is a more deliberate one. Rule 30 minus 5 what you release creates space for what truly belongs. You begin to respect your limits not as problems to fix, but as signals to honor. You stop running on fumes. You stop bragging about your ability to survive without rest. You begin to measure strength not by how much you can endure, but by how early you notice when something is out of alignment. You build boundaries that do not apologize. You say no with softness, not with guilt. You trust that people will adjust. And if they do not, they were relying more on your compliance than your connection. You also begin to stop rescuing. You stop confusing love with over-minus functioning. You stop stepping in where people need to step up. You let others carry their own discomfort. You trust their process and you trust your own need to stay in your own lane. You are no longer available for guilt-minus-based relationships. You are no longer responsible for every honest piece but your own. And as you sit things down, something remarkable happens. You do not collapse. You rise. With more breath. With more clarity. With more presence. You feel yourself returning not to an old version of you, but to a deeper one. One that was always there, beneath the layers of performance and protection. You begin to love lightness. Not as escape, but as sacred clarity. You stop filling every hour. You stop chasing every opportunity. You begin to understand that abundance is not what you add, it is what you edit. What you refine. What you release. You stop hoarding time, hoarding people, hoarding expectations. You start trusting that what stays when you stop chasing is what was meant to stay. You redefine responsibility. You understand now that being available for everything makes you effective at nothing. That saying yes to every request means saying no to your deeper focus. That your attention is not just a tool, it is a treasure. You stop giving it away so easily. You stop calling burnout a badge of honor. You stop being impressed by your ability to keep going. You begin to ask a better question: can I live in a way that does not require constant recovery? You start designing your days not around how much you can do, but how well you can feel while doing it. You learn the art of almost. You do not answer every message. You do not finish every conversation. You let some things be unfinished. You let others figure it out. You stop patching every hole. You trust that the world does not collapse when you rest. You begin to see how much energy you spent holding things that never brought you peace. And with every burden you set down, you reclaim something better: your lightness, your clarity, your joy. And the beauty is, you do not need to explain your release. You do not need a manifesto. You simply let go. Quietly. Consistently. In the way you schedule your week. In the way you breathe in the morning. In the way you say no with a smile. In the way you choose not to react when triggered. In the way you walk away not in anger but in peace. Because you are no longer trying to prove your worth by how much you can carry. You know now your worth was never in the load. It was always in your presence. After enough years of striving to improve, to succeed, to adapt, to become someone the world will approve of, you eventually arrive at a quieter place. Not a peak. Not a finish line. But a clearing. A pause. A breath. And in that space, you finally understand that all the reinvention you chased was not wrong, it was just incomplete. Because you never needed to become someone new. You only needed to become someone true. You'll begin to see that your identity was never meant to be a project. It was meant to be a presence. You were never broken. You were only buried beneath layers of fear, of proving, of polishing, of performance. And now, you are done performing. Not because you are tired, but because you are finally clear. You stop trying to brand yourself. You stop needing to be understood by everyone. You start making peace with being misunderstood. You let people form their opinions and you stop managing them. You no longer shape minus shift into someone more acceptable. You simply are. And in that being, you become more powerful than any version you ever tried to create. You realize that most of your exhaustion did not come from your workload. It came from constantly editing your truth. And the moment you stop editing, you begin to recover. There is a version of you in 2025 that looks back at this moment and smiles. Because this is when it started, when you chose discipline over distraction, purpose over pressure. Keep listening. You are not just passing time, you are reshaping your future with every word. Emotionally, energetically, spiritually. You find strength in softness. You find rhythm in honesty. You find direction not in ambition but in integrity. Rule 30-6 You are not here to impress, you are here to express. Rule 30-7 Stop reinventing yourself to survive. Start returning to yourself to live. Rule 30-8 Authenticity is not a brand. It is the absence of hiding. Rule 30-9 The real you does not need an audience, she just needs air. Rule 40 Your wholeness begins where your performance ends. You start making smaller, braver choices. You wear what feels like you. You speak what sounds like you. You share what has been aching to be heard, not for attention, but for release. You trust your preferences. You stop apologizing for them. You no longer explain why certain people drain you. You just make space for those who do not. You start honoring your pace. You stop rushing toward becoming and start rooting in being. You let your life be quieter, slower, softer, not out of fear, but out of trust. You trust that you do not need to be louder to matter. You do not need to be faster to arrive. You do not need to be everywhere to feel enough. You stop outsourcing your confidence to external applause. You start building it from internal agreements. The agreements you make with your spirit when you follow what feels honest. When you say no to what looks good but feels wrong. When you say yes to what scares you because it sounds like home. You understand now alignment is the real self minus worth. You make peace with contradictions. With being both confident and uncertain. With being both soft and fierce. With being both a work in progress and deeply wise. You stop needing to be tidy. You let yourself be whole. And with that wholeness, you stop chasing reinvention. You start practicing reintegration. You remember the parts of you that went quiet in order to fit in. The joyful one. The creative one. The idealist. The dreamer. The truth minus stellar. You welcome them back. You let them reshape your days. You no longer call them naive, you call them necessary. You begin to curate your life like a gallery not filled with trends, but with truths. Not filled with image, but with intimacy. You create moments that do not need to be posted. You live days that do not need to be explained. You no longer seek validation. You live in verification, the inner knowing that says I am aligned. You do not need a 5-year plan. You need a 1- breath pause. I1- step alignment. I1- moment return to what is true for you. Because from that place, every plan becomes powerful. Not because it is perfect, but because it is honest. This is your real reinvention. Not the kind that demands a new name, a new body, a new identity, but the kind that lets the old masks fall, that lets the old roles dissolve, that lets the real you, the you that was never lost, only quiet rise. And you do not rise with fanfare. You rise with clarity, with ease, with grace, because you no longer need to be announced. You are not waiting to be introduced. You are already here. There comes a moment in your life, often quiet, always honest, when you stop asking, "Am I behind?" and start asking, "Who told me where I was supposed to be by now?" Because so much of your stress, your shame, your self-minus doubt was never about your actual path. It was about someone else's timeline, someone else's definition of success, someone else's rules about when things were supposed to happen. And you unknowingly, silently carried those rules like gospel. Until now. You are not late. You were never late. You were living, learning, loving, healing, breaking, rebuilding. And none of that is delay. It is depth. It is texture. It is proof that your path was not linear because your soul is not shallow. You did not miss the train. You took the scenic route. And now finally you are done apologizing for that. You stop rushing. You stop sprinting toward milestones. You stop cramming growth into impossible timelines. You begin to feel the beauty of your current pace. Not slow. Not fast. Just true. You move like someone who trusts where they are because where they are is no longer measured by comparison. You begin to understand that maturity is not about reaching a point. It is about releasing pressure. It is about living your days from the inside out. It is about waking up and saying, "I am still here and that is enough." Rule 40-1, just because you arrived later than others does not mean you are less ready. Rule 40- to life does not reward speed, it rewards sincerity. Rule 40-3, your timeline is not broken. It is bespoke. Rule 40- for stop rushing to catch up to people who are not even going where you want to go. Rule 40-5, the pace that protects your peace is the pace that will reveal your power. You begin to respect time differently. You no longer hoard it. You no longer fear it. You no longer try to manipulate it into bending to your will. You walk with it. You cooperate. You learn that things unfold exactly when you are ready to hold them, not before. You begin to see that nothing real is ever late. Healing comes when the heart is safe. Love arrives when the spirit is open. Creativity returns when the body is rested. You stop forcing. You start trusting. And in that trust, you find a rhythm that fits you. Not the old you. Not the expected you. But the version of you who is no longer rushing to meet someone else's idea of progress. You give yourself back the permission to bloom in season. You stop digging up your growth to compare it to someone else's garden. You water what is here. You tend to what is now. You realize that a life well lived does not need to be early, it needs to be present. You begin to redefine ambition. It is no longer about being the first. It is about being fully yourself when you arrive. You no longer seek applause for speed. You crave depth. You want to be known not for how quickly you got there, but for how deeply you lived once you did. You begin to feel joy again, not in giant wins, but in gentle alignment. You take your coffee slower. You listen longer. You let laughter linger. You are no longer scanning the horizon for what is next. You are looking directly into what is now. And now at last is enough. This is not giving up. This is growing in. This is not lowering standards. If you found this video valuable and meaningful, please consider sharing it. You never know, it might help someone who truly needs it. This is honoring soul minus timing. This is not apathy. This is peace, the kind that comes when you no longer feel behind in your own life. After 40, your relationship with possessions begins to shift. What once felt like goals now feels like weight. What once felt like making it now feels like maintaining it. You look around your home, your closet, your schedule, even your relationships, and you start to ask, do I really need this? Do I even remember why I wanted this? The answers don't always come with guilt. Sometimes they come with relief. Because you begin to understand ownership is not power if it costs you presence. And in many ways, you were taught to accumulate things, people, recognition, without ever being taught how to ask, but do I actually want this life I built? You look at your shelf, your commitments, your inbox, your reputation. You see how many things you once fought for, only to realize they now demand energy you no longer want to give. And so begins the quiet rebellion, not against the world, but against excess. Not because more is wrong, but because you've changed. You now crave clarity, breathing room, fewer tabs open in your mind, fewer people you have to impress. You want to feel your feet on the ground, not on a treadmill of constant accumulation. Roll 40-6 if it no longer adds meaning, it is quietly subtracting it. Roll 40-7, anything you need to constantly prove you deserve will eventually drain you. Roll 40-8, space is not emptiness, it is preparation. Rule 40-9, a simple life is not a small life, it is a focused one. Rule 50, ownership means nothing if it does not also come with belonging. You begin to release the myth that more is always better. You understand that some dreams were planted in you by fear, the fear of being left out, of being forgotten, of not being enough. You held on to goals because they once made sense. But now you're allowed to update your vision. You let go of the jacket you kept just in case. The friendship you kept out of guilt. The project you kept out of habit. You let it all go, not with drama, but with gentleness. You are no longer hoarding meaning. You are curating it. You look at your calendar the way a sculptor looks at stone, not asking what you can add, but what you can carve away. You make space. For breath. For stillness. For a slower breakfast. For unscheduled joy. You discover that enough is not a number, it is a feeling. And when you hit it, you stop climbing. You stop grubbing. You stop reaching for what never belonged to your hands in the first place. You come home not to a place but to a rhythm. To a room with fewer distractions and more light. To a version of yourself that no longer needs to accumulate to feel anchored. You realize that the things you most longed for were never material. They were always internal. Stability, clarity, respect, rest. And none of them required a bigger house, a faster car, or a busier schedule. They required fewer distractions from your own roof. You stop aiming to be impressive. You start aiming to be present. You give things away not because you do not care about them, but because they no longer reflect who you are. You are no longer in the business of explaining your value. You are in the process of embodying it. And the irony, the more you let go, the more you have. Not in volume. In vibration. You walk lighter. You think clearer. You laugh louder. You love deeper because you are no longer stretched thin trying to hold what does not want to be held. You are no longer the person who needs everything to look good from the outside. You are becoming someone who feels good on the inside. There is a moment often unannounced, often misunderstood when you stop asking yourself, what should I be doing next? And start asking something quieter. What if I simply lived this moment fully, without trying to get somewhere else? It is not laziness. It is not resignation. It is the shift from compulsion to choice, from endless motion to embodied meaning. After 40, this question becomes more than philosophical. It becomes necessary. Because you have lived long enough to see what doing more can cost. You have chased the goals. You have built the systems. You have filled your days with doing. And now? Now you want to remember what it means to just be. You no longer want a life that is just effective. You want one that is alive. You want to be present with your child's laughter without mentally running for your to-do list. You want to feel your breath in the morning not just because it keeps you alive, but because it reminds you your ease still here. You start to move slower. Not because you have lost energy, but because you have gained discernment. You no longer say yes to momentum just because it's moving. You start saying yes to stillness, to quiet, to activities that do not produce content, to conversations that do not end in action steps. Rule 50-1: you are not behind, you are just living at a pace that fits your soul. Rule 50- to every task you add should be weighed against the peace it might steal. Rule 50-3: doing less is not failing, it is choosing depth over distraction. Rule 50- for you do not need to earn your right to rest. Rule 50-5: presence is not what happens when everything is done, it is what makes life feel done, even when the list is still long. You begin to let go of the idea that your worth is tied to your output. You do not need to be constantly producing to feel valid. You are allowed to exist without achievement. You are allowed to feel joy on days you do not check everything off. You stop living like life is a performance review. You start living like it is a gift, and sometimes gifts are meant to be unwrapped slowly. You learn to hold yourself gently. You stop shaming your need for quiet. You stop comparing your life to people who have different values, different seasons, different stories. You reclaim your rhythm. And in doing so, you start hearing your own voice again. You are not here to be optimized. You are not a machine. You are a living, breathing, feeling soul. You need sunlight, stillness, eye contact. You need unhurried mornings, unstructured evenings. You need room to be unproductive without being unworthy. You begin to curate your commitments. You stop signing up for things just because you can. You protect your time like a living organism. You understand now time is not a container to be filled, it is a relationship to be honored. You stop asking, what else can I add? And begin asking, what would feel like enough? Because enough is where peace lives. Enough is where joy breathes. Enough is where you come back to yourself. And when you finally settle into this way of being, even if only for a few hours at a time, you feel something profound. You feel rooted. Not grounded by willpower, but by a deeper knowing you do not need to do more to become worthy of your own life. You are already living it. This is not about quitting. It is about quieting the noise, the shoulds, the performative pressure, the subtle belief that every second must be maximized or you are wasting time. You are not wasting time. You are finally learning how to inhabit it. You no longer need a gold star for resting. You do not post your downtime for approval. You live it. Fully. Without guilt. Because you know a well-lived life is not visible to everyone, but it is felt deeply by the one who lives it with intention. And maybe for the first time, you feel free. Not because everything is perfect, but because nothing has to be. You are not living for arrival anymore. You are living for atonement. With your truth. With your body. With your day. You stop asking life to prove its meaning. You start offering it your presence, and that is enough. There is a kind of peace that only becomes possible when you stop living your life like a finish line. When you stop measuring progress by distance and start measuring it by depth. When you stop asking, how far have I come? And start asking, how fully am I here? It is not a resignation. It is a realization that you were never meant to chase some far minus off version of wholeness. You were meant to remember it. And now, finally, you are remembering. After 40, life stops being about milestones. It starts being about moments. Small ones. Quiet ones. The kind that do not need a camera. The kind that no one else applauds. The kind that make you close your eyes and whisper, thank you. The kind that remind you you made it, not to a goal but to yourself. You begin to live like someone who no longer needs to earn rest. You allow joy to sit beside sorrow. You let grace soften your ambition. You begin to build a life that is not just manageable but meaningful. Not just functional but felt. You stop asking for more, not because you are settling, but because you are satisfied. You stop proving your value. You start protecting your presence. You walk slower. You breathe deeper. You are not waiting for peace, you are making space for it. In the way you speak. In the way you say no. In the way you let go without fanfare. You know now that the most sacred things cannot be measured. They must be honored. The way your body holds you, even after years of criticism. The way your spirit still hopes, even after seasons of disappointment. The way your life keeps unfolding, even when you are not trying to force it. Rule 50-6. You do not need to finish the story, you just need to tell the truth in the chapter you are in. Rule 50-7. You are not late. You are not early. You are on time for your life. Rule 50-8. Wholeness was never something to achieve. It was always something to uncover. Rule 50-9. Your life does not need to be big to be beautiful. It needs to be yours. Rule 60. If all you do is return to yourself, again and again, that is enough. That is everything. You let yourself be ordinary in the most extraordinary way, fully alive. No filter. No performance. Just here. Fully with your coffee. Fully with your people. Fully with your breath. You stop looking for signs that you are doing it right. You already know because you feel peace where there used to be pressure. You carry less. You need less. But you feel more. More grounded. More grateful. More true. You realize that this quiet, unremarkable, beautiful abundance is the life you were always meant to live. Not a version. Not a performance. But the rooted presence of someone who has come home to herself. You stop reaching for legacy. You start planting presence. You trust that who you are when no one is watching is who you really are becoming. You stop narrating your life for an audience. You start listening for your own soul's voice, and you honor it every time it whispers. And when you look back now, you do not feel regret. You feel reverence. Not for what you achieved, but for who you became. Through the detours. Through the quiet choices. Through the days no one saw, but you lived with courage, with grace, with truth. You are not here to finish perfect. You are here to finish whole. Not polished, not performative, just true. And so, this is your next decade. Not a race. Not a project. Not a reinvention. But a return. Again and again to the most important place you will ever arrive. Yourself. If this message stirred something in you, don't let it fade. Write one thing down that you'll start doing this week. 2025 doesn't magically change anything you do. And your future begins the moment you decide to move, even just a little.